It's now crunch time. You cannot get this bit wrong or your puzzle won't work. The only tool you're going to need for this rebuild is a screwdriver, although a tea towel or paper towel might be handy if your 4x4 internals are particularly slippery or gross. Before we get started, let's take a good look at the core of this puzzle and take note that there are very important grooves that attach to each stem. These are super important and they're universal to almost every 4x4 and you must get those right. Here's how they slot together. You shouldn't have to force them. There's one thin and one thick notch, which will match any centerpiece. The first thing you need to do is have one center assembly attached to the core. Marry the pieces together, then fit the screw and spring, then screw it all together. Don't make it super tight at this point though, but enough that it will hold together, and count your turns if you want to be sure that the cube is going to be equally tensioned when you finish, to make it easier to tune it in when you're done. Put that piece aside for now and find one layer's worth of centerpieces, edges and corners. You should have 4 centerpieces, 8 edge pieces and 4 corners for this build. We're going to make the first layer in 2 halves. Put a couple of centers together face down on the table and make sure they're aligned properly. Next, add the correct edges, corners, and half edges from the other 2 sides. Watch out at this point because the magnets are going to try and wreck the work you've done so far, so be careful to hold on to both sides that are connecting so you don't ping pieces all over your bench. Next, do the same thing for the other side. 2 centers, 2 edges, 2 corners, and finally 2 half edges. Now, we're going to take the little core assembly we made earlier and use the magnets to trap this piece in between the 2 halves, forming the base of the puzzle. We're not finished with this layer yet though. Now we have to put in 4 of these small internal pieces, 1 on each side. Next, fit 4 large internals on top of those. On to layer 2. First, fit the 4 edge pieces. They only fit one way, so this is very hard to get wrong. Now let's work on our first vertical side. Add 2 center pieces in the correct orientation and get another one of your small internals and drop it in the right way around. Look before you go jamming that thing in there or you'll have to take some steps backwards. Make sure and get it the right way around. Next, we'll take another core assembly but minus the screw for now and make sure we connect it perfectly to the core. Remember, getting those onto the core the right way around is absolutely vital or your center edges won't turn when you're finished the puzzle. Next, carefully get the screw and spring in there. Don't forget the spring whatever you do, and give it the same number of turns as you did when you first made our core assembly. Repeat this process carefully for the remaining 3 sides to complete level 2, and the best advice I can give you for this bit is go slowly and carefully. This is the most difficult and fiddly part of the build and where it's most likely that your cube will come apart, so please be patient, go slow and don't give up. Do not forget to put in the small internal pieces before the core assemblies as well, or you are going to have a bad time. With that done, it's now time to build the equator of eternal pieces to make a complete ring. If you haven't worked it out already, they go into the puzzle in this order: small, big, small. This is what the 4x4 is hiding in between each center. If you're able, just hold all 3 together and manipulate them gently in between the centers. If you can't manage to do them all in one go, don't worry, you can also do them one piece at a time, just like this. Large piece in first in the middle, and then the 2 small pieces on either side. Again, just go slowly and carefully and you'll be fine. Now it's time to take a moment to admire the cool insides of a 4x4 and maybe take a sick pic for your Instagram. Speaking of which, don't forget to follow us at speedcube.co.nz. Layer 3 is super easy, you'll be pleased to hear. Just put the remaining edge pieces in place, the last 8 center pieces, and then gently drop in 4 internal pieces, 1 per side. The box part of the build is now complete, and so now it's time to get to work on our lid, or the last layer, which is pretty much exactly the same as what you did at the start. Put a couple of centers together face down on the table, make sure they're aligned properly, add the correct edges, corners and half edges from the other 2 sides, then do the same thing for the other half. 2 centers, 2 edges, 2 corners, and finally 2 half edges. Take the final core assembly, no screw this time please, and use the magnets to trap this piece in between the 2 halves, forming the lid. Add in the final 4 small internal pieces, 1 on each side, followed by the last 4 large ones. You should now have used all the pieces. If not, I'll see you back at the start of this video for another go. It's now crunch time. You cannot get this bit wrong or your puzzle won't work. Very carefully with two hands pick up the lid, then pick up the body of the puzzle and look closely at the center assembly and core and make sure that the notches in both line up. Don't match the colors, match the notches. Slowly and carefully put these two pieces together, being careful not to tip out any of the internals, and these should slot nicely together without any drama, forming a nice cube shape with no bowing or bulging or anything like that. The last fiddly bit is to introduce the final screw and spring to this top side and give it the same number of turns as all the others. Then you'll be able to very carefully do some turns and test the tensions and see whether the cube needs tightened, which it almost certainly will, unless you really crank the screws up while you were building. Don't just spam turns as fast as you can at this point or your puzzle will explode, and that's on you. Pull the center layers apart to get a feel for whether it's loose or not, do some very careful turns and tighten all 6 sides equally as you go, until it's just the way you want it. And that's it. Let me know in the comments if this worked for you or if you have any hot tips that improve any part of the process. But for now, thanks for watching, happy solving, and I'll catch you in the next video.